Hello SGD, this will be titled Vitrified Stone and Looking for Atlantis, Lost Ancient Technology. Part 3 in like a diversionary series, so part 1 was looking at the legends of stone softening. Part 2, the use of acid to make those, same thing, the polygonal walls, sort of focus on Peru, but you also people mention these in some other places as well. So now it'll be about vitrified stone. This is actual vitrified stone from those Iron Age forts, and what we have is essentially melted stone. You can see it's melty, bubbles, and how dry stone walls were heated to such a temperature that they fused together, so without mortar. So again, you can see almost looks like a xenolith where it's been included inside. All right, mentioned this in the last part and sort of touched on the first, but on the reddish glittery mud the Inca used for perfecting their stonemasonry. Here he also references here vitrification. Now, just to put it again, I mentioned in part 2 when I talked about this paper, he was putting forward ideas, examining ideas. He was not the ones pushing these. He was relying on faith in the work of some other people, and that will be a theme that we'll get to at the end of this. So he's talking about vitrified layers. Okay, now vitrification. Now, what is vitrified stone? At least for me, but I had been looking things up recently, so the machine had probably caught on to what I was doing. When I looked this up, the first result I got was Vitrified Stones by Jan Peter de Jong, and essentially it's okay. Well, but this name's very important. He'll come up. He's basically the source of the river where it comes to this vitrified stone stuff. And again, like saying that this is vitrified stone, we'll look at that place, what's going on. You look up vitrification, so it's from Latin or glass. So basically it's you melt granite, it turns into obsidian. So vitrified stone would be glass. Yeah? One of the like actual sites that has this is those vitrified forts, and it's been attracting attention for a few years. We'll look on that in a moment, but now we come back to these. This is Ollantaytambo in Peru, and talking about vitrification. So he's highlighting these parts. So when looking up, this is important, when looking up, these joints seem to have received a special treatment which is generating a high light reflection. Now, Helmut Tribush, I think that we'll come to it, but I think he's taken on faith that some very specific claims have been made and taken them on, and then let's look at that. So when looking up, this is an important feature, we'll be repeating this often. This has to do with the light source and the camera angle. Okay, we'll come back to that, this will be repeated. Here's another example, Stone Junction, Sacsayhuman, and so along this edge here, you can see it's slightly different, but it's reflecting light, especially on here in the corner. So this is another example of vitrification, but what is actually happening, we'll look at that. So vitrified, where does it already come from? Alfredo Gamarra, Jesus Gamarra, and Mr. de Jong. Reflection of light from some stone joints or stone surfaces is significant, and let's just go on. So he references especially a video on the Inca throne refraction effect by the Jan Peter de Jong channel. These are some screenshots from those places where he points out, and so we have, this is vitrified stone, and Gamarra and de Jong are like, no, this is vitrified stone. They're not sort of ifs, but they're pushing it very, very hard. And so we have, for instance, reflections coming off over these parts here. You can find his channel, and with a lot of videos on there, so I'm not taking him out of context. I'll link his websites and stuff as well. He also links these websites, Ancient Mysteries Explained, that's from his own page. You can buy, he's selling a DVD there, and we have these pictures, what's going on. We'll come back to that. So vitrified stones, now where are these? Again, it shows it in his video. So here we see those large walls from Sacsayhuman, the sort of sawtooth shape. Now the area is directly across, so there you can see a photo of the area, but let's have a little better look at it. So there's a screenshot from his video. He's highlighted it there, not me. So if you're standing on the second tier, Sacsayhuman, look across now, you can see a bit, but look at it. That's the same thing, that's the same place. You can zoom in and you can see that those features are some of them that he's talking about. Slightly different angle. There's his screenshot. I've just zoomed in, and so that's the area he's highlighted. And just to be certain that that's the place, you can see those features in the stone and that there. So it's definitely the place that he's highlighted. There's another angle. We can zoom in, get another type of view, and just now from looking from the is that the west or the east? That'll be from the east. Okay, there we can see it as well. But back to the photo, so we see this is vitrified, melted stone, and it must be because it's reflecting. Well, you also have there at Sacsayhuman these slippery dips. So they're both reflecting light, but you take another time of day from another angle, and it's not reflective at all. So the question is again, it's the angle of the light and the camera that makes the real difference, and you'll get reflective surfaces all over the place. Any shiny pebble, take a pebble, shiny river pebble, get it in the right angle in the light, it's going to reflect. So these are all vitrified stones. So we go back to his page. Now let's focus on Freeman. But now again, whenever I hear precision, great precision, but vitrified stones are typical. Okay, and stones were once softened as clay. So again, he's stone softening and vitrification. Now what's really happening? Everything that is reflective and is Peruvian or Inca or ancient, well, this is vitrified. Okay. What we have is, you can see the reflection of his fingers. It is just it's a trick of the light and of the camera on a relatively polished surface. It's very easy to do. Recently, amongst the lost high-tech circles, Baraba caves come up. It's impossible to do by hand. It must be lost ancient high technology. Got videos covering that. Did an experiment, again, getting it to this impossible by hand precision. So claimed the high priest of lost ancient high technology. It's not only possible, it's very easy to do. So both these sites, other ones similar reflections, are described as being beyond a mere polish. Impossible to do by hand, can't be explained. But there are commonalities between all those claiming these types of things. So it's just like there are commonalities between lost ancient technology and ancient aliens, with vitrification and impossible to do hand polish. Well, they have a common feature, and one of those is the method, which is conclusion seeking data. And what is that conclusion that they're seeking data for? Well, there's a list. Precision, okay, now, but the most common one, so it's whether it's Pleiadians or Atlantis. This is a common theme, and what is happening is that they're all looking for this lost civilization with this mystical, and again, there's a theme, so they do say these things. I'm not really I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm being truthful in that exaggeration. That there's this sort of mystic, they had spiritual capabilities. Graham Hancock, they had spiritual science and telekinesis and telepathy. And this is just a common feature that runs through all the people who are saying, well, we can't lift it, we can't cut it, we can't do that. Therefore, lost civilization, lost technology, or alien. So, okay. This is we've got two pics here. We've got the unction stone from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and just a random set of stairs, old stone stairs. It's the angle of the light and the camera that's really giving this, or is this vitrified stone as well? Because if we go by the rules set up by the vitrified stone people, you're going to find it everywhere. Okay, this is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the stone of the unction or anointing. As you can see in this photo below, the stone of unction is a polished red stone and measures 6 meters in length, 1 meter wide. It is customary for pilgrims to kiss the stone or rub it with oil and then wipe it with a cloth. So what's happening is, just like these stairs get worn and at the right angle you're going to see a reflection. People have been rubbing this, and well, okay, they're rubbing it with oil, but there's oil in your hands, and this also causes polishing. So I'm not sure about the people rubbed oil on the sides of there, but just people, over years rubbing their elbows has again polished up this stone as well. Stairs get worn through polishing and repeated use. It's just the nature of stone. You can get like sort of any church, any old built that's old enough, and there's some relic or just a corner post where people just, when they walk around, they just put their hands on just out of habit. It gets polished up. The oil and the rubbing, it just does that over time. All right, so the Gamarras and de Jong dismiss polishing outright of the stones, whether it's intentional or incidental by wear. They just, no, can't be done. Must be something else. All right, so come back to here, and so only the joints, okay, when looking up at the sky, reflective corners, okay, and we have a hammered surface, so a rough surface and polished corners. Only the joints are highly reflecting and seem to be vitrified. The surface of the monoliths and connecting junction stones themselves appear only to be hammered. This suggests that there is a special treatment of the joints and an intention behind. Yes, that's true, but not for a special intent. Well, the intention is practical one. Yes, there's a good reason for it. It's a practical reason. A part of a reason is the shape of the stones themselves. So those shims there, that's that area there. When the sun isn't shining down on it, we don't get a reflection. It's all about angles. So that's where we're looking now. Again, I'll be repeating this, but notice that these stones are essentially cuboid. They're right angle corners, or very close to them. That's an important feature of these stones. Here's another close-up of the surface, so you can see the hammered surface a bit more clear. And these are the reflective corners, and even from this you can see that there is this polish there. The texture is quite different. Rough surface, smoother surface. It's like it's been sandpapered or polished down. Here we see that same wall from behind, and again, just to note, they're rectangular blocks. That's where those shims are. Mentioned in the last video, so people often will say, oh, how did they get these giant stones fit them so perfectly? Well, in this case they didn't. They got shims. They slid in these little stones in between, which aren't very heavy at all. But that's that place. Again, the sun and the camera's not in the right angle, no reflection. Sun, camera in the right angle, we're going to get a reflection, and the shape of them. So I'll just use that as a... So we come back to this stone. This has, again, these essentially 90, no, not precision 90 degrees, but in essence 90-degree corners, and along that corner is where you get this so-called vitrification, unlike pillared stones. So amongst the Gamarras, and they're not going to show these ones because these pillared stones, which don't have right angle corners, have a gentle curve. Well, the shine doesn't turn up in there. And this is a type of limestone, but even in andesite and granite blocks that haven't been nicely cornered off, you won't see that same thing as well. It's all got to do with the shape. This is at Sacsayhuman as well. So the big stone walls that get the most attention, but there's also andesite blocks as well being used in different parts. It's a larger temple complex, not just those walls. Here we see an angular corner block. So it's, again, this is cuboid in shape rather than the pillared stone, so very much like this. In that same collection of stones, well, just okay, an important feature, chipped corner. So when you have these 90-degree corners, chipped corners, right? So we have a chipped corner there, and we have a reflective corner. If you highlight a little bit, you can see it's just that slight change in colour where the angle of the camera and the sun gives it appearance of not vitrification, but the same thing. Rough surfaces from hammering. As you get closer to the corner, it gets nice and smooth, and then at the corner it's reflecting. Same thing's happening here. Rough hammered surface on top and bottom, but along the corner. Closer you get to the corner, it sort of tidies up. Here you can get much rougher, less rough. Yeah. Okay, common feature. So I'll link this as well. This is evidence for vitrified stonework in the vestiges of Peru. Jan Peter de Jong and Christopher Dunn. Okay, and the photos that they use, and so again, notice you can see the sun, all right, now where the light's the direction of the light because we have the shadows of the cobblestones, shallow angle of a camera, and we have a reflection there. Now this one I'll be using more often, but you can just keep the same things happening. So here we see again those examples. So it's from Jan Peter de Jong and the Gamarras and Christopher Dunn, and then it looks legitimate, and they're so confident in the way they say these things. They're masters of the narrative. But we take the key points. Archaeologists assume the perfect fitting stones are the most developed style of the Inca. Well, they're going to say it's Atlantis, all right? But regardless, there is no explanation of the shiny surfaces that can be observed. Normally assume that these parts were simply polished by the Incas, but Jesus Gamarra and Jan Peter de Jong they've examined these stones, and the highly reflective surfaces concluded that something other than polishing must have occurred. Just again, shout out to David Morley. He took a great series of photos from Peru, and unlike the normal ones, he's got a keen eye, and he looked at little details, important ones amongst just the nice shots as well. So here we see that's the same street. Notice the shape of the cobbles. There are, I think, 7 main streets that have these walls in Cusco city itself. They're all got different paving stones. So we see the cobbles and the pavers in between. This is where we are. Okay, so if this is vitrified, then these stones must be vitrified too. Why not? Okay, why not? Why? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. All right. This is in Croatia, so these must be vitrified too. They're reflecting. Must be, they're stone, it's reflecting. This must be an example of lost high technology. It wasn't that a lot of these cobblestones were put down in just the last 1 or 2 centuries, or even sometimes a bit later than that. But no, it's vitrified. It's they're all melted and vitrified and glazed. Yeah, all right. So take a look at this wall as well. There's the larger picture, but notice the line. Okay, so the camera here is at a steep angle. It's almost 90 degrees from the wall, but then the angle changes, and you notice the shallower the angle, the more reflection you get. Again, that's just what's happening, all right? Take a look close up again. So we have essentially cuboid blocks. Now there are those beautiful multi-faced polygonal stones, but these ones which are just ashlar masonry, where you see it's essentially 90-degree blocks. Now take a close-up. Now you can see it's much rougher, and you get to the smooths up on the corners where the joins are. Rough, smoother, and that's where those reflections are happening at the joints. Back to that wall. So let's get rough surface in the center, smoother surface on the edges where the joins are, and again cube sort of design blocks. Rough, smooth edges. You can see even a change in colour because it will change in texture. The stone's the same colour. Another example, close up of this area, so very rough finished. You notice this is a smoother, it's been polished off, as where these parts have it. There are various stages of finishing. You really need to look at the details of these walls. That's why these photos by David Morley were so great, because they're, again, looking up at a little detail like this rather than just sort of pointing at the wall in general and saying lost ancient high technology Atlantis. Smooth surfaces, rough surfaces. Now, here's an important, lots of mason instructional videos, what you'll see that I'll always say is always point your chisel or your hammer away from the corner unless you want to ruin it, just because it's going to shatter. This is an important feature or reason for this type of finishing here. Here's a sample where I've just got a pounding stone, piece of granite banging on the corner, and you'll see that big flakes, already pieces are coming off, but this is if there's a nice block of granite with a really beautiful sharp corner on it, very easy to break off. That was a bit clumsy me the way I'm doing it. I'm going to shift over and I'm going to do a lot better now and really break off chunks very quickly. I'm angling it towards the corner. I'm doing what you shouldn't do because, well, depends on what your intention is, and this is an easy way of... Notice I'm also holding it up on one corner against the table, so I'm not really putting any force on it. But let's have a look at an example. I put this video up a few days ago. Japanese stonemasons rebuilding this old impossible wall. Now notice what he's doing. He's banging on the corner, and he's taking big pieces off. Now there you can see where I've started breaking off big bits of stone by hitting them on the corner, but more important, the one on the bottom, look, tap, 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 it goes away. Alright, so this is a very important feature of stone to take into account when it comes to those blocks which are at 90 degrees. So just like here, big bits will break off very easily, especially if you're putting sort of force into it. This is just a demo, but you saw that Japanese fella. It's a real thing. Alright, so these walls, this is a less finished than those other examples, but what's going on? Do a little bit of a zoom in, so we see where the joint is more highlighted and it's been smoothed out. This joint is less impressive, it hasn't been worked on as well, and so it doesn't look as nice. This is one of the features why they do this polishing, and that's what it is, it's a polishing in between the gaps. It helps to make the stone look better. So for instance, again here, the change in texture highlights the joints. So rough in the middle, gets smoother and smoother until it make it just, again, aesthetics is depend what you like. What's your favourite? Everyone's got their own favourite colour. But well, yeah, right. But we look at the top and we see this, sloppier work with a sloppier finish. As we go down, we have a quality work with more effort has gone into it, gives it this effect. As where this stuff up here, just doesn't have that nice polish. The shadows are going to blend over. It's just going to have a different effect. So back to, again, just for instance, these walls now, even in the daylight, you can see the reflection. Nighttime, maybe that was a consideration that they wanted to do. Maybe they just wanted to highlight the joins, make it better, or frame the blocks. I'm not sure the exact intention, but night or day, the reflections are there, and it's got to do again with camera angles and angle of the light coming from there. So you don't want to break, take great care unless you want to destroy your corners. So another in the middle, you can go away hard with a pick. But if you were to try and do that on the corners, you're going to ruin the block. So a lot of care needs to be taken, and that's why another reason why you have this change in texture, because the tool would change and it would go from big, heavy, sledgehammer type strokes to very delicate, very aiming the tool away from the corner, and then ultimately to do the final thing, just grabbing a block of stone, some sand. Even the stone itself is abrasive, you don't need to even that, but to get that final polish. Now this I've done lots of examples where I take it's black granite, but it looks grey, and then when you polish it, it turns black. So the textures of the stone will depend on the finish that it's given. So this is just done, this change difference in texture can be achieved by grinding, by abrasives, as where the less work's been done. So firstly, the corner sort of doesn't stick out as much, again with this little sort of pillow over the top. And yeah, again, just maybe aesthetics is up to you, but what will look better. So this is why one of the main reasons why you don't have it on the corners. It creates this highlight effect as well by using abrasion. He's very certain that these surfaces cannot be explained. We can rule out that it's done polishing. How did he come to this conclusion? The truth is that they just assumed this conclusion because it suits their goal. He's looking for Atlantis and lost high technology. They're looking for an anomaly, so they grasp this one anomaly and say, well, you see, and then if a reputable person comes along and says, oh yes, that's interesting, you see, science backs us up. This is vitrified, therefore Atlantis. This is how it works, all right. Polishing stones such as those to a very high reflective surface, not just reflecting light a little bit, but I mean mirror finished reflection. This is very quick, very easy to do. So not only that, I can turn this rough surface, in about an hour, I can get it to this type of finish. I've got links in the description to the playlist, and like what's more, I could do a stone of this size in roughly that amount of time. I could probably do larger, but so that would be, I've got how to make the polishing paste from beginning to end, couple different versions of polishing them, also getting them to high precision flatness as well, which is actual high precision, not the so-called claimed lost ancient high technology precision flatness. All right, so there you see the reflection. So it's got a lot to do with the angles of the light. With a really high polish, it should be like a mirror, but these vitrified stones only reflect again at this really steep angle with the light coming from the right direction. This is a very easy thing to do. And they say, in your experiments you do it on a flat table. I'd just like to point out that one of the things I learned by doing that is that with the stone, the mud itself is very sticky, so sticky you can just bond the polishing stone to it, so you need to keep the right consistency and moisture level. But I could polish that large wall with a large polishing stone and not exert myself because the stone sticks to it. So so I would take advantage of this. All these are the little tricks that they would have, whether it's Egyptians or Peruvians, would have built up over generations and generations. With a few small experiments, I was able to stumble upon these things. If I had my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather had all done this before me, you can only imagine what other little, every time you can increase your efficiency by 5%, 10%, whatever, it's all going to build up, but even my inexperience, I was still able to get. I could do one of those now if I had a little bit more physical enthusiasm, I knew a little bit better tricks. You can only imagine what they could, how quickly they could do these things, and that also brings up the question of why didn't they? So it's also, there was only a certain level. Same with the Serapeum, people fastened the precision, and once I did these experiments, you look at them in detail, you realise they were cutting corners everywhere, all the time. Okay, so back to the evidence of vitrified stonework in Inca vestiges of Peru by Jan Peter de Jong, Christopher Jordan, and of course the Gamarras. He brings up vitrified stone forts, and so links these. Arthur C. Clarke. All right, now I'll link these in the description. I'd start with, there was vitrification process itself, quite a mystery. A team of chemists on Arthur C. Clarke's mysterious world subjected rock samples, rigorous chemical analysis. They concluded that the temperatures needed to produce vitrification were up to 1100 degrees Celsius. Simply burning the walls with wood interlaced with stone could not achieve such temperatures, and recent experiments along these lines had virtually no success. So again, like with the polishing, I'll link that Skeptoid article. They talk about this 1937. They did an experiment, and his important feature, earlier on he talks about the furnaces. All right, so Bronze Age, Iron Age people had furnaces. They could get to these temperatures. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And all right, so the core of the basalt rubble then become red and hot. So let's look at a little bit further. All right, I'll also link that second article, but they did excavations there. And so these old forts, the foundations were stone, but there's traces of wood is still there. There's also, in this one he talks about, there was a series of trenches built. There was actually a furnace, like ironwork evidence going on in the centre as well. The wood collapsed, the stones around it encased the core, the fire burns, the stones around it become a furnace. So not the whole fort was vitrified, parts of it were, and then there are non-vitrified stones laying around. But when they piled on top, they acted like a furnace, and you can see that again, that rubble falls off. This is entirely possible, but more importantly, what actually is vitrified stone has no comparison to what Jan Peter de Jong and the Gamarras are bringing up. So this is vitrified stone. It is possible that people, they build a friggin' iron furnace for these things to happen. It's just, again, not impossible. Now he's going to talk about, it's just, you can pause to read. Again, I'll link it all in the description, but it's a false comparison with these Iron Age forts. There's much There is what's in red is what very questionable. There has been much discussion about the Inca vestiges in the Peruvian Andes. It mostly revolves around whether the stones are vitrified or not. No, you're saying that. This is not a discussion. You've generated this discussion, and now you're saying it's like inserted into the. All reasonable people are talking about this. No, you've created this. Now, where are we with this particular piece? The Moon Temple is located in Sacsayhuman Ecological Park, and heavily shining surfaces. Vitrified rock. Again, he's always like, no, this is vitrified rock. Okay? And no, you can't polish it. No, you can't do this. It's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. Now, regardless, there is no explanation of the shiny surfaces that can be observed. Jesus and Alfredo Gamarra, like we've examined these and personal observations and analysis. We've concluded something other than polishing must have occurred. An idiot. All right, identifying, so fair enough, following traits to help. The melted effect is obvious, so how would you identify vitrified stone? Now it comes, what is the definition of obvious? Because this guy's definition, I think, is obviously very different from what most other people would have. Now here he talks about the sample that's been taken, and he shows the photo from the area. The walls are cut with a curved and rectangular forms in them. These are man-made structures, which rules out a natural phenomenon. Okay, let's look at that. Now he takes a close-up. We see the particular spot where we small sample from a limestone cave, and then comparing it to granite and andesite. But anyway, so we have this microscopic photo. So we see a surface layer on there, and then we see the limestone behind there. Analysis was done. So an analysis was done by the University of Chemistry. The analysis of what is happening there was pretty much done by Mr. Jan de Jong. All right. Now he does, mentions this. This is not unusual since the University of Cusco realised the Sacsayhuman Archaeological Park is part of a karst landscape. So limestone. So why was that sample? It's got there's limestone there, and even in that surface layer which they tested has, for instance, calcium, so good indicator of limestone. Karst landscape. Pardon me. Now also that area is grey limestone protrusion from the Jan Peter Cretaceous Formation. I'll show you what is a karst landscape. We'll come to that in a moment, but it's got to do with limestone. So we even have a town. So down here, Sacsayhuman, Jan Peter, and this is a limestone formation. So we have this is from Lalipata. Again, look at the orange and the grey limestone. Sacsayhuman, right next to the main gate. Now, having learned a little bit more from earlier, I'm now almost 100% confident that this is a natural piece of bedrock. It's a very common feature in Incan architecture to incorporate that. Possibly this piece as well. Other parts because they've obviously been quarried and moved in from elsewhere, but these have been incorporated now. Just off to the side here is the Temple of the Moon, and again you see the same type of stone and the colouring going on as well. Alright, the vitrified surface. Aluminium, magnesium, calcium and carbon, silicon. All right, now also, that one not so much. The chemistry in that particular sample that was taken, again, from that cave, not from any of okay, but good on them for taking a sample at least. That's a great thing. This elevates them above Brian Foster and the rest of the crowd as well. So kudos, but I think there's still really big problems with it. Whilst the spectra does not show explicitly the surface is vitrified, the composition is that of a glaze. Yeah, okay, but sort of. Further analysis needs to be carried out to confirm the state of a layer. Absolutely, yes. The different chemical composition makes it very unlikely these surfaces were created by polishing. Even if a layer of ceramic paste was applied, how was the whole heated to the requisite temperatures without cracking the limestone? It tends to do that at those sorts of heats. All right. So apply, like when you do pottery, you apply the glaze and you have to heat up to really, really high temperatures. At 300 degrees, limestone Celsius will start to take damage. When limestone is heated, calcium carbonate decomposes to form calcium oxide. We still now have a basis of making cement is they take limestone and they burn it, then they and then they put water on it. It creates a chemical reaction, changes it completely. Whitewash, lime, all of these things come from limestone. So limestone just in the campfire from a reasonable time, but you really build up. The guys who do it properly build up basically a furnace around it by piling wood around it too. So that's another example. Yeah. All right, but stoneware glazing, making pottery, 1200 to 1300 degrees C. If people could make pottery again at these temperatures and apply even in ancient times those glazes to them as well, they will be able to vitrify stone. But the point is the temperature there, and that's limestone would be absolutely destroyed by that temperature that they're talking about here. All right, so we can, now we're going to mention that possibly there was a kiln going on inside that cave. All right, now further. We get prots, I think I've got them better now. All sorts of explanations have come up from advanced machines, or maybe simple tool and stone, moulded stonework, concentrated sunlight, fire methods. This means that the heat was it has similar to a ceramic glaze. This means that heat was somehow applied. How the heat was applied is not clear. What is clear is that an unknown technology is being used to create ceramics on this scale. The heat production must have been greater than the normal ceramic methods. Again, he's making BS. Okay, and now most reference work of the stonework of Peru was produced by Protzen. His work primarily deals with carving stones with primitive tools, such as those that are actually found. However, Protzen has looked at these effects and has suggested it could be achieved by polishing. To date, only andesite has been attempted with very limited success. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Just making that up. After the analysis of a surface layer, it is clear that polishing alone will not produce the requisite heat to produce a ceramic glaze. And again, assuming it is a ceramic glaze applied at temperature. Eliminates polishing as a means of creation. Probably let's look at what's actually going on. Good excuse for it. Scale and phenomena also precludes carving and polishing. So even the cave itself couldn't have been carved, and all these other could not have been carved. It would take too long, let alone thousands that dot the landscape. So again, denying just reality and that tools actually work. Would you, if they had iron, would they same thing be said? Argued that ancients had a technology to treat stone with heat and that the stone was soft at the moment of construction. Vitrified stone. Okay. If stones were fired in the kiln, no, the temperature, the chemistry of a rock, this is just bullshit. All right. Another option is use of sun dishes. You're going to melt the stone to vitrify. This is just not the way things work. So even with this dish to do this kind of work, then they had to add some sort of magic to change the way that crystals behave under different temperatures. No, all right. One possibility is that the cave was a kiln itself. No, because it's limestone. If it was a kiln at that heat applied, it would ruin that place. So that can be eliminated. Now, here's a couple pictures of a cave in the nearby area. We'll have a look at some better ones in a moment. There has been much discussion. Okay, so we come back to this. There has been much discussion. No, you've created the discussion. There is not a discussion about this. You've generated a talking point and you've tried to legitimise it with clever use of words such as this, but this is just not the case. But we're looking at the Moon Temple, Sacsayhuman Archaeological Park. That's Templo della Luna, that's where it is there. It's just off to the east of Sacsayhuman, very short distance. There's this thing, okay, this is obviously melted. Yeah, okay, there's another higher res photo. I'm going to zoom in on that. So, as far as I know, meltiness would go down, not sort of point upwards. This is an actual photo from that now. Heavily shining surfaces must be vitrified rock. Melted effect is obvious. So this is not Okay, anyway, let's keep going. Walls are cut and curved, rectangular forms, man-made. This rules out a natural phenomenon that has to do with that surface layer of that sample that was tested. It's a cast landscape. Ceramic paste was applied. How was the temperatures achieved without cracking the limestone? It tends to shatter at those type of heats. Well, it's sort of not really what it disintegrates, and if any moisture comes onto it, then it turns into quicklime. This is a cast landscape. Basically, if you have a limestone where there's water seeping through, you have Jenolan caves here in Sydney, I know there are famous Postojna in caves in Slovenia and other famous ones. There are a few in America as well. This is reflecting the light and it looks melted. Obviously, this is vitrified stone. Okay, now we'll have got some great photos of that particular area, and we're going to see the geology that's going on. And again, now it's the horizontal has gone into vertical, a bit like we saw earlier at that sort of big slippery slide, just across from Sacsayhuman, the main walls. Lots of stone. This is obviously, Jan Peter, he says, well, you can't carve this. You can't carve this. So again, there's the temple. Now again, notice the orange and the grey limestone and all that. So different minerals are going on. It's very, even with my very amateurish understanding of geology, you can see that this is just by the uniqueness, or not unique. It's unusual from what the norm is. So it's an interesting place. The different colours are going to tell you there's different reactions and minerals and all that stuff that's going on in here. Again, look at that. There's another nice one. Again, different, interesting place. Now we come to the nitty-gritty of all of this. And we're coming up to the entrance of the cave. And here we go. Some important features there. There's that stair. Now, these type of surface layers, again, he's saying it's vitrified. You can just eliminate that this was a kiln and that there was any high temperature going on here because it's limestone. Now, again, all these other effects. Oh, this is look at this. It looks melty. Look at the surface. It's melty. There's another angle again. High reflection when the sun and the camera angles are right. Oh, it's melty. Look at that. Look at the surface coating. This is impossible. What's going on here? And, well, you're going to get the first big giveaway. What's going on is there. Here's another one. All right, so now we look. What do we have? We have water running through limestone, and geologically interesting limestone, and whether they're... Okay. We have these type of effects going on. This is just what you would find in limestone with water running through it. You can look at it, looks like it's being glazed, but this is just a normal effect, and I'll show you an example in a moment. This is not lost ancient high technology. So again, is this melty? No, this is just what you would see in any other cave system, limestone cave system. This is Mother Shipton's cave, as it's called. Very high calcium levels in the water. People put up teddy bears and shoes and all sorts of things, and what happens is they get covered in calcium, and we have the same thing happening here, the same sort of, even notice the similarity in colours. This did not take thousands of years or hundreds of years or even years. In weeks or months, things get completely calcified by placing them under this water and calcium running through it. This is not vitrified. It was this teapot vitrified. This teddy bear was everything's freaking vitrified. All right, so we go back to that one now. Again, look at this particular shape as well. We'll come back to that. This is like anti-gravity. It's running upwards, not downwards. Again, we're seeing this. Now notice again, it's particularly heavy on the top. This coating. All right. There's another angle, and again, you get the sun, you get this effect going on. Again, you can see it's almost like this chalky residue that's come over this place, where you can see where's it coming from. It's running from up there and it's running down because there's water. You can even see it's a bit caked over in this section, and that moisture takes that calcium over and it deposits it, and along with the calcium and other minerals that are in this geologically interesting area. Here's another view. What do we have? We have stalactites, stalagmites types of things. We have running water coming through this place. And well, what about these effects? This might be from even like in the caves of the nice stalactites and stuff. Like, they don't want you to touch them because your hand reacts and they can turn the light colours turns them dark by the reactions. But let's go a little bit further. So here we see, and he has a similar picture in his paper. Again, all the links in the description. I'll bring the receipts. What's going on? This is a mystery. This is it's vitrification. We have a similar effect going on here inside this particular landscape, and the same thing. So it has this metal sheen, and yeah, all right. Geez, I forget the technical name of it now, but I know I've seen it elsewhere. And what is the same thing's happening here? Bacteria is one of the reasons that they're hydrophobic. So you need a high water, moisture environment. So even if when the water's not directly running over these places, as long as there's enough moisture and stuff going around, that these effects and they deposit minerals in there. This is all right. Now back to those. We see water running. You can see that the water's running down there as well, and it's creating the same sort of thing. This, it must be a glaze. It's applied at high temperature. And he even said it's a karst landscape. So he knows what he's talking about. But we're always looking. So what's he doing? What's happening here is that, again, this is a common technique for people who actually believe, as well as people who are not being honest. The academics and the established, they're all hiding this from us because, look, I've found this one crack in the wall, therefore look at this little crack in the wall, the whole thing's going to collapse because there's this one little crack there. This is a common tactic for conmen, religious hucksters and all this other thing. Set up, they're covering things up, and there's this grand secret just behind the veil. I'm going to open the veil. You just need to believe. You need to believe. And then create this one little doubt, cherry pick, get this one factoid, ignore the millions of other facts that work in one direction, just find this one that can maybe it's a question mark, therefore Atlantis must exist. Alright, so it's not just shoehorning in, they're crowbarring things in here. So it's, there was less gravity back in the time. Humanity lived longer, so because there was less gravity. The life was bigger in the past, less gravity. Atlantis existed in the earlier orbit, so South America, Cusco, were a part of it. Cusco was Babylon the Great. This is a common feature. Now, there are always little variations, but they have the common feature going through all of these bullshit artists, I'm going to call them, because there's still artists in bullshit, even if they believe it. If I think I'm justified in doing something terrible and I really believe it, it's still a terrible thing, whether I do it deliberately or whether I do it because I really believe in it. But yes, they've done the work. They've gone to such great efforts, and they're just trying to shoehorn this stuff in. Atlantis existed. They're so desperate to find the aliens or the lost civilization or Atlantis that they use a spyglass, and they can only see through that. There's no land, there's only sky, because I've got I'm looking through a spyglass. If you look at the world like that, you're not going to see the world. So back to this particular paper by Helmut Tribusch. Now again, I think he's a legitimate fella, and even in his paper he's careful with his words. It's ifs, maybes, possiblies, unlike the paper Jan Peter de Jong and the Gamarras, who are there was Atlantis existed. They're not maybe. The Inca, Cusco is much older than Inca times. So the Inca didn't do these things either. So this is where Brian Foster and Lost Ancient High Technology Community, slightly different colours, but the painting's exactly the same. And what's their target is stones mysterious. We get one anomaly or one appearance of an anomaly. Then we expand that into fact. You can't polish it. There's no natural explanation for this. This is a glaze applied at heat and stuff, and that's just how they work, because they're looking for this. They're a conclusion, and then they go and try and find data. They just need one piece, one little hook, and ignore everything else. So I believe Helmut Tribush, again, he's careful in his choice of words. He's investigating idea, and I think you should invest. There's nothing wrong with looking at alternative or new ideas. That's a great thing to do. But yeah, and we only, the alternatives, we only really need one viable example to present to say, okay, look, yes, there has been a problem. We do need to reevaluate things. We just need one example. But by selling this bunk, that's getting in the way of anyone sort of moving forward and learning any, taking any step forward. So again, he's quoting this de Jong fella. He's taking that guy on his word. We can't, it's hard to double check everything all of the time. And this is the same thing with Galal Ali Hassan. So, seems again, he's a legitimate fella, but, he's, engineer Christopher Dunn wrote the following. And Christopher Dunn makes very specific, very technical statements about flat, perfection, parallel, accuracy compared to surface plates in modern facilities. And, look, he's got a letter from a company, Truestone Corporate. But you read that, with these hucksters like Dunn and these other people, they can get away with it because people are they assume that everyone, if someone presents something as fact, that they've actually done some work and that they're not lying. And in the case of Christopher Dunn, he's just a hack fraud liar who even hoaxed experiments. You could blame his other stuff on just really terrible analysis, incompetence, grand incompetence. But since he faked an experiment, he's a fraud and a hoax, deliberate. All right, but that's how it works. Like we're looking for the lost technologies. We're going to sell. We're going to sell. We don't give a shit about the principles or anything like that. We've just got to sell. And they're all looking for Atlantis. Now, some of them have a confirmation bias where they just don't want to see the disproofs. They see the single supporting fact. Vitrification, precision flatness, precision. You can't polish it, you can't do that. And then they build, a whole Atlantis from that. Now, you can build a civilization from one single supporting fact, and very often these facts are just incorrect. So some people don't see the others because they truly believe. Especially in the post-religion world, and as they say now, the post-truth world. There is this thing. I think missing people are more than just calculators. And there is a psychological need. Love is illogical, but it's a very important part of a human experience. And so it's. Yeah, comforting lies is sells better than unpleasant truths. But for the most part, it's snake oil, just pure rubbish, deliberate for money. They do this because even if when facts are brought to them, that they go back to selling them for their next tour is the giveaway that it's pure snake oil and it's cherry picking. So whether you're doing it because you want to find that conclusion and you're sort of doing it you're fooling yourself because you want to get to a certain location, so you cherry pick the fact that goes, or whether it's such as in the lost ancient high technology industry where it's deliberate, careful, malicious cherry picking. It's still basically the same thing. Actually, there is a difference, but the result is the same, even if the intention is different. So it is different, but it is the same. So vitrified stone looking for Atlantis and lost time. Like this is vitrified stone, and the stones that Jan Peter de Jong and the Gamarras have taught has no resemblance, no comparison to this as well. What they're trying to do, they're looking for Atlantis. They're looking to to jump on the Graham Hancock gravy train and possibly get, a big cellar and, promoted by Eric von Daniken and this type of stuff. Yes, and that's it. So in regards to this vitrified stone stuff, and just like with the other lost, once you start peeling it away and what they say for certainty, you just can't be this, and there is no explanation, and it can't be therefore, whatever. No, it's not. And again, it's either self-delusion, but I think it's malicious for the most part. So again, vitrified stones and this type of argument, it's just like with the stone softening argument, it is pure and utter bunk. It's a conclusion looking for a single piece of data to hang their hat on and milk, whatever their intention is. Again, they could be genuinely believe in this. I find it very hard to, they've done the research, so to say, and they make the claims. This is not some casual observer reading them and taking it on good faith. These guys make the claims that they've done the work, and what we have is anything but that. And so with that, vitrified stones, blah. Okay, links in the description as well to these sources and to the playlist of the experiments where I'm, non-stonemason, or my first attempt, are able to do these things that all these friggin' experts on stone pointing who make a lot of money claim was impossible. So with that, cheers, have a good one. It's punk.